Wednesday, 31st of January 2024, 12 PM. A younger Rory was walking to his college game society's console day, having had no classes that day and no video scripts to write. As he walks into the room, he thinks of what games that he will play. Ultimate Chicken Horse is fun, but needs the right people. Speedrunners was good, but the PS4 was generally taken. Mario Kart was always a good time, and the smug cunt knew he was better at it than most in the club. Happy with his brief moment of egoism, he walks into the room. The Switch was full, so unfortunately the Wiggler Link tech couldn't wreak havoc yet. It was quiet, probably since the event had only just begun, and there was only one other console out at the time, the PS4, with two people sitting on it playing a game that caught his attention. He walks over, asks if there's a spot and what the game was. The response? A friendly yes, followed by a name he had never heard in his life. Undernight, Inbirth. Well lads, fighting games, am I right? I'm fairly new to fighting games. Could you tell? September 2017. Unfortunately, my memory isn't so pristine for this one to allow me to set the scene, but this was when an even younger Rory handed his dad 40 quid in cash and asked if he could use his card to buy Overwatch. And little did a soul know what that one purchase would spiral into. I like Overwatch. A lot. By extension, I actually just really like hero shooters. So I actually just really like Overwatch. In all seriousness, I enjoy pretty much every hero shooter I've played. At the very least, I can always see their good qualities and extract some amount of enjoyment out of it, even if it's only for an hour or two in comparison to the 1,000 or two that I've sunk into Overwatch. And enjoying hero shooters this much, it also ends up extending into me now just enjoying shooters a bunch. With how mechanically difficult Overwatch is as a shooter in terms of aim, with it having all the buzzwords involved in mechanical aim, and it being my first shooter on keyboard and mouse because the squids don't count, it means hopping over to slower paced shooters is something that comes more naturally than breathing, meaning whenever I'm playing some CSGO with friends, I always end up enjoying it because I just don't really encounter a big barrier of difficulty. The same could be said about MOBAs. I genuinely really enjoy them since I was set into a League addiction years ago, and since I naturally found my way into playing a lot of League, I was able to adapt to the controls easily, and 6,000 hours on a COVID lockdown later, playing other MOBAs, whether they're controlled more traditionally or using WASD, comes easily. My mechanics transfer over just like with shooters. I immediately start enjoying it more as I have less to learn and am performing way better because of it. And with me hopping back on Deadlock to give it the second chance it deserves, I'm loving that too. These are my favourite types of games to play in a PvP setting. I assure you, I do play a lot of single player, make sure you never give me the chance to talk about Persona, but aside from just generic, realistic shooters which I enjoy every now and then, my bread and butter PvP experience always has, and probably always will be, the hero shooter and the MOBA. And the single among you have probably recognised a similarity in these two genres that grips me so. Characters. A debate that I often see, being an Overwatch player of course it resonates with me, causing me to notice it more, is that games with strict characters with unique capabilities don't allow player freedom and player expression to play them how they would wish. In other words, playstyle is limited. Now I've had a very long discussion on this previously, so I will keep it brief. It's true. Overall, as a sweeping statement, without getting into the nuance, it's accurate, especially if we are talking Overwatch 1 or older characters in League. In a game like CSGO, everyone has the same tools, or at least some amount of access to them. This means a player can choose how they want to play as you're given the tools and then told to figure it out. Certain tools may be better in certain scenarios you like. Maybe it's something silly like smokes and a shotgun to hold an entrance, or maybe some flashbangs and an AWP to peek main, or even a molly and an AK so you can effectively hold down multiple angles by making one zone of danger a war crime. Now, I'd also argue this is effectively the same as picking a character, but this video was long enough without me getting into these types of semantics. Anyway, in most games with character selections, you're playing the character's playstyle, and generally can't get much more flexible. Certain scenarios in which this isn't true, see the video I made on it for detail, but regardless, I kind of enjoy this about them. If I'm in the mood to play something fast, instead of my speed being limited to the same as everyone else, I can pick the character who's built to be fast. forfeiting a strength in another area, such as bulk or range. I enjoy a game where I'm the only person who can do a certain thing in a lobby, as it creates some real variance in approach and inherent value that I need to follow up on. If the enemy has a Mei, I can't afford to overextend and get caught out by her wall, but if they have an Ana causing problems with her disruption who's playing it safe in the back, I'm going to need to get in closer to jump her while keeping the Mei's location in mind. Obviously, this is going to be true of any game. To stick with my CS example, how you approach a long angle is going to be entirely different if they have an AWP compared to an AK. However, your flashbang is still just as effective against that AWP as it is against that AK. The potential output is different, the AWP is a lot more threatening at this range, even though both can one-shot, but whether AWP or AK, the odds of them hitting me after a flash and a smoke to block their sights is significantly lower. By extension, as the AWP or AK player, you know to expect the potential flash or smoke, and you have answers to it, whether it's your own flashes, smokes, or something different like a molly or frag. To a lot of you, this example seems like a silly comparison, and that's because it really is. I'm not trying to compare these as a way to say one is better, but just to demonstrate my thinking on the differences. I enjoy both of these interactions, but there's just something about facing a team where 5 or 6 of my opponents have fundamentally different toolkits and options compared to 5 or 6 of the same tools that I really adore. To put it into a sentence, I prefer a narrower breadth of possibilities with more depth in said possibilities. And I won't even get started on MOBA style shop systems because that adds whole new layers to the side tangent that's already getting out of hand. So, as stated, I love hero shooters. By extension, shooters in general, and also MOBAs. I primarily love them because of the interactions having dedicated characters creates, but let's be real, it's also because I started playing Overwatch when I was 12 and League when I was 14. Because I got into those games naturally, on my own, with no external help or influence, I played these games at first because I saw them and I thought they looked cool. As a result, I got into them very easily, and now, because I reached a, if I may stroke my ego for a moment, fairly above average skill level in both games, the skills acquired from both help me expand out to more across the respective genres. I never encountered a hurdle of getting into these games at first because I was just a kid having fun. It wasn't, oh yeah, I should really try that, or an invite me sometime, I want to try it. In other words, it wasn't an intentional learning experience that it would have become now when I tried to pick up something new with the intention of picking it up, such as magic. Instead, it was simply trying something new for the sake of enjoyment. I was just a dumb teenager who saw a talking monkey and a bloodthirsty werewolf and decided this would be his personality for the next 6 years of secondary school. But there's one more genre that places this heavy emphasis on character interactions. If anything, it's probably the backbone of the entire genre, fighting games. Video is about fighting games and I still managed to talk about Overwatch for 7 minutes, that's a new record. There are definitely other genres where you'll pick a character that can change how you play, but the way I like to separate them is that if your response to seeing someone do anything you don't like is this fucking character, man, then it's probably a game where character choice changes a significant amount about gameplay and is a primary mechanic. But to return to our story, Undernight, Inbirth. I sat down with these two and watched them play out another round. I didn't quite get what was going on, but the game looked lovely. It had this really nice, high-definition, pixel art-esque look to it. I wasn't an entire stranger to fighting games. I had played Smash, though never seriously, and I had watched a lot of random Street Fighter and Tekken videos, but something about this one was really different, though at the time, I couldn't place my finger on it. The controller got passed to me, and I was presented with the character list alongside controls, and was immediately lost. ABCD? This is a PlayStation controller. What's a Z input? Why is it sticky? After getting all of it translated, I locked in the character who stood out to me the most, Enkidu, and lost, immediately. But I played again, and another one. It was fun. I couldn't do motion inputs whatsoever, so the person who was teaching me, who would later become a lovely friend of mine, did a little coaching to help me work around it. Enkidu had a command normal she called stop sign. Undernight had a scaling system with its buttons alongside an auto combo, really helping me set up basic combos to actually do damage. And as I got the hang of it and mostly got lucky, I was really enjoying myself. I got interested, considered buying the game for myself, but upon seeing that it was released in 2018 and not too active, ignored that the sequel was already released by this point, I really was not the brightest, I decided to leave it to be a game I play at college with people more along my skill level. I played Undernight another 2 or 3 times that semester, enjoyed it every time, but never really came back to it for a while. I finished my assignments and exams and went right back to Overwatch. In fact, this was just around when the channel blew up a little bit, so I was really focused right back onto my hero shooters. But during this time, I always had a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I wanted to give it just another try. Just go in and actually try get into fighting games. Though this time, instead of Undernight Inbirth, I was interested in a different game. One a lot of my friends online would talk about and play. A game which I had also had a little bit of interest in and actually knew about before I had even played Undernight. Of course, I'm talking about Guilty Gear Strive. So on July 21st, 2024, I booted up Steam and decided to play Guilty Gear Strive for the first time in front of a bunch of arseholes who were shocked at the fact that I didn't know what I was doing. There were even people who I had never seen in chat before who had joined. I played the tutorial to learn what buttons do what and how things work, and got told it was a terrible idea. I picked my character based on who the game said was easier and also who it said was faster. I then got told that was a terrible idea. I then played a few online matches after changing around the controls a little, got berated for playing poorly, and was then asked if I wanted to play a 1v1 to help me learn. This person then invited me to a lobby where we had 150 ping, a solid 20 FPS, and also beat the fuck out of me. I then closed Guilty Gear Strive and played Pokemon Showdown for an hour. Let me say this, fighting game players. Most of you are genuinely lovely people with great intentions, but ye are the worst ever when it comes to giving advice, and this is coming from someone who used to play League, the same game that I got told to neck it in my very first game. It was a less than stellar first impression, but it was also an important lesson. Never stream a game you're trying to learn and expect people to be helpful. That one was entirely on me. I didn't touch Strive for another day before deciding giving it another try was only fair, and this is where the story is going to change from just a story to having an actual analysis. So let's do some more setup. I chose Giovanna, largely in part because the game said she was on the easy end to use, and because she was labelled as a rushdown. When I watch fighting game clips, the rushdown characters always just look the coolest to me, and I tend to enjoy faster paced characters when they're an option. Some of my favourites in Overwatch have always been Genji, Tracer, Pharah, and Winston, so I thought playing a character archetype that I tend to enjoy would be better. Also, I like her dog, Fork Found in Kitchen. So in my first day of actually playing Strive, there were a few things I noticed. The first and most obvious, I could not do motion inputs consistently for the life of me. I had heard there were options to turn them off in more modern games and use a simple scheme that lowers your damage in exchange for turning moves into a button press, but in my stubbornness and want to actually try learn these games, I decided I was going to stick to the standard control scheme, much to the detriment of my mental health early on. I'm going to delve a little deeper into my thoughts on motion inputs later, but just know that while trying to learn everything else about the game, having the move that I want to use not happen was actually driving me demented. But the other thing, which more than likely was also part of why I flooded motion inputs so much, was my finger control and controller of choice. When I play fighting games, I prefer to use a regular game controller. In this case, I was using some off-brand Xbox one that I would use for all the other games on my PC, usually JRPGs. This is something that surprised a lot of people when I was streaming it for the first time. I was being told that I should just use my keyboard, but listen for a moment. When I play a game that requires my keyboard, this is how I'm playing it. Left hand on keyboard, right hand on mouse. All my muscle memory when I use a keyboard to play games is in my left hand. My right hand has none, and I sure as fuck was not about to bind heavy slash to right click. Something about using my right hand as a keyboard input mid-game just does not compute in my brain, as utterly stupid as that sounds. But in a controller, I've used controllers for single-player games or console games all the time. The muscle memory is there. I know what the A button is, so using a controller I'm familiar with just seems like the obvious right call. And while it definitely helped me learn quicker, it wasn't without issue. Firstly, what I said at the beginning of this tangent. My control on the controller was not good. To start with, when I play a fighting game nowadays, I use the D-pad for my movement. This is because all the way back then, and still now in fairness, I would frequently input up by accident on stick, whether mid-motion input or even just doing something simple like dashing. I don't know what way I hold the thumbstick at all, but I always end up pushing it up even just a little bit. To stop this, I swapped over to using the D-pad very early on, but this didn't stop my other issue, being that I just couldn't hold still. In Overwatch, there is nearly never a reason for you not to be moving. There is no movement acceleration, so you're always at max speed, meaning AD strafing is something you should constantly be doing, and I have a habit of doing this. I'm always pushing down the movement key when I play Overwatch, unless I literally need to hold still in a safe spot for something or other, but in those cases, I would instead be holding crouch. What I'm saying is, I have a habit where my left hand always wants to be pushing down a button, and in Guilty Gear, this was a bad thing. The most frequent occurrence was these two habits combining into one. First, when I wasn't blocking, I would nearly always be inputting a movement command, typically forward. Second, was that when I'm using a controller to play a game with combat, I was very used to the X button on an Xbox controller being the main attack button. If you play Strive, you may have already pieced it together, but this meant that if I ever blocked someone who was minus or just had an opening to attack, I would always be throwing out a command normal forward punch, which in Strive is a universal anti-air that knocks down opponents. This meant I would end every interaction way too early without even realizing the harm it did, because I'm pretty sure if you had said the term Okizeme to me back then, I'd look at you as if you had 3 heads. Of all the things that made fighting games difficult with me coming from hero shooters and MOBAs, this small thing was actually a huge hurdle. In every other game I have played, your movement and your attacks are usually separate. At the very least in my particular forte they are. You can move in any way and it won't hinder the attack you throw out unless you just screw up your position, or at worst, moving will just make your attacks less accurate like in CS. But that can be counteracted by just learning counter-strafing, which I find fairly easy. This gave me the aforementioned habit of always moving, constantly feeding the game movement inputs, which in a fighting game can register as a different attack than what you have planned entirely. While in Overwatch your movement and your aim are one and the same, if you learn how to move well and incorporate your aim into your movement, you will be leagues better in terms of mechanics than others. It also means that for myself, in order to improve at that, I always moved. And of course, like I said again, I didn't suddenly shoot lasers instead of bullets if I started moving left. A big difference between a fighting game and a shooter is that you need to be a lot more intentional in your button presses, because being punished in a fighting game means you're no longer playing the game. And this was the hard pill, nearly even harder than motion inputs were, because before I could properly learn motion inputs, I had to learn when I should have no inputs. This habit took me about 2 or so weeks to break. I documented some of my clips from when I first got the game and posted them into a Twitter thread, which you'll see as the actual tweet on screen, but as I broke this habit and I was finally starting to not throw out random moves and more consistently perform motion inputs, the second roadblock was hit. Fighting games actually need you to invest time into them. Now there's a lot into this statement, but what I mean in more blunt terms is that fighting games need you to be doing your homework. In every game I play with a training mode, it's more of a suggestion than anything. In Overwatch, its best use case is farming engagement on Twitter, and in my other most played game, League, the best thing the practice range could really offer you was practicing last hitting or working on your jungle clear. But in fighting games, this is where most of your hours will be spent. Now, do you need to spend 20 hours in the training mode before fighting a human? No, not at all. But you know, it certainly helps. Despite being hyperbolic, this was a tough pill to swallow for me. I'm both very impatient and much more of a learn by doing in a real setting type of person. In other games with characters, I'll learn what the buttons do, mess around for a minute or two to see if I think it feels good, and just grasp some of the basics, and then jump right into a real match and figure it out. And while this works great in a genre I've got plenty of familiarity with, it was a recipe for disaster in playing Strive. I just didn't even know how to do a combo. I wasn't button mashing, which is a start, but I wasn't exactly doing great either. I may be stubborn, but I'm also smart enough to know when I'm wrong and hopped into the training mode to actually try learn a combo. I just used a simple one that I found online and kept grinding it out until I got it somewhat consistent, something I now know is called labbing. Labbing is something which back then was a sort of necessary evil. While nowadays I definitely enjoy it once I get to grips with the character, and I'll talk a little more on that later, it's getting to grips with the character that will only ever happen after playing a real game for me. But before playing a real game, I need to learn what they do and how I can do it, with it generally being a combo, and I'm sure you can tell how this is the worst feedback loop of all time. I don't want to lab because I don't get the character, and I don't get the character because I don't lab. I didn't really enjoy labbing even if I put my impatience to the side, because I couldn't tell what was improving other than my ability to push buttons. And really, there was nothing other than that improving. I was just working to get a bread and butter, but I wasn't working on the rest of the shopping list. I knew that my neutral, advantage, and disadvantage, all buzzwords that I had learned from random videos online, were not getting better with this. And I also didn't know about all the capabilities that fighting game training modes actually had at this point, so I just thought it was me and the dummy. And in hindsight, that was oddly intelligent of me to be thinking about. Despite my stupidity in doing very little research that would have made this process way easier, most learning fighting game videos that I've seen nearly always involve the person getting good at one combo, hopping into a match thinking they've got it down, and still getting rolled. So fair play to PixelRory for knowing what he lacked and what he needed. Ignore that he did nothing to improve these other skills before hopping into another match anyway. Look, I already said it, but I was just too impatient. I had the game open, therefore I wanted to play the game, not push buttons against an enemy that doesn't fight back for an hour. So with a semi-competent combo under my belt, I went back to floor 2 and started fighting. I also started winning a little, though I was losing a different paddle, and as always, it returned to the motion inputs. I distinctly remember trying and failing at my super repeatedly this day. I was managing to finally land the combo every now and then, but I just kept messing up this input, which really wasn't that hard, just a backwards half circle forward, but I could not for the life of me get it down. With this annoying me so much, I decided to put the controller down, having had an overall relatively successful day of practice paying off. The most important part of which instilled the lesson into me that labbing isn't actually a waste of time, but I would still take my Overwatch approach to it, where practice is good, but playing with my brain turned on and engaged was vastly more important to actually put that practice to use and to improve in the other areas that sorely needed improving, primarily my neutral. Playing Giovanna absolutely helped me in this department, and I am going to come back to my entire thoughts on how I actually learn fighting games through Giovanna rather than Guilty Gear, but a big thing is that Step Dash and Dog Missile were massive crutches in my horrific neutral. Having watched a video about Giovanna and learning that Dog Missile just eats projectiles made my life a lot easier, and Step Dash, which made going in and out less committal, really helped me get into better situations. Also, watching the same video helped me learn something quite important, in that actually knowing what your buttons do is really needed. Nowadays I would know to just open up Dust Loop and I'd have an enjoyable read through it, but back then, I didn't even know that moves would have extra information not available to me in-game, let alone what Dust Loop was. But learning that the hitbox on Crouching Dust was actually insanely long and disjointed, which made it a great round start or poke tool, was just a small piece of information which helped inform me on creating a game plan, because I knew what buttons should be used in what situations, instead of just running into an enemy and seeing if I can land a combo. Basically, just learning what the better buttons Giovanna has are and why they're better was really helpful, since I didn't know that much at all. And way later down the line, I actually opened up her Dust Loop, but I'm getting ahead of myself here because we have to get back to the continuity. A little content warning for this part of the story. It's fairly important to it all, though it's going to get heavy, so if death makes you uncomfortable, you may want to skip ahead. August 12th, 2024, my father passed away. Now, I'll be honest, I don't want to get into it any further than that. So, what did I do just a few hours after my dad had passed while I was struggling to sleep? I booted up Strive. As you do. I could not tell you why I did this. Honestly, I don't know. I wasn't in the mood for Overwatch or League, which most of my friends who played were probably going to ask me to play with them. They had every reason to. I know they were worried, but I think I just wanted to be alone without needing to talk to people. And I had no single player games to be playing, so it kinda just appeared as the best option for a very depressed Rory. A solid 4 hours of the best option. I kept playing until 4 AM. I'm honestly shocked I even found games. But something strange happened in this time. I was playing somewhat okay. I was landing my combo more consistently and messing up less. My guess now is that since I really wanted the distraction, I was able to more easily focus on the game. But after this adventure, nothing. I ended up not opening Strive again for well over a month. There was not really a reason for it, I just wasn't feeling like it. I mean, I did have a streak where I uploaded 3 videos in the span of 9 days during this time. I think I was just really trying to keep myself busy by working, and none of these videos were fighting game related at all, so I wasn't really given much of a reason to open up Strive. That is, until I got the itch. September 22nd, 2024, I was just suddenly really in the mood to play Strive, and proceeded to play against the same Zato 1 for several hours. Something I've noticed since this is that any fighting game comes in bursts for me. I'll have a few hours, maybe a few days, where all I want to do is play a fighter, and then I just suddenly don't. Months could pass between me opening up whatever game it is, and this is a big difference between fighting games and my usual genres. I mean, I will really hyperfixate on whatever game is just doing it for me at a certain moment. I mean, late 2017 to late 2019 was just Overwatch every day and nothing else. From there onwards, it would be a mix of Overwatch and League every day until 2022, which largely became mostly League since all my Overwatch friends had jobs at this point, which lasted till about 2023, thanks to me getting into YouTube videos. I mean, I would still be playing other games, some Minecraft, Persona, Pokemon, but it was largely sprinklings of single player games between hundreds and thousands of hours of Overwatch and League every chance I had. While nowadays I have more of a balance, it's still more accurate to describe them as bursts. I'll do nothing but play Pokemon VGC for a month, then nothing but JRPGs for several months, then back to Overwatch for however long it grips me, before Root shoots me away for an entire semester, only for Magic to tag in and take my wallet out back. But with fighting games, it's even more dramatic. I'll really only play them for a day or two, then a long break, and unfortunately this is the one thing that I cannot give a proper analysis. I do enjoy these games, evidently I do. I would not have made this movie-length video talking about them if I didn't, but they just don't kidnap me how a hero shooter does. And it's because of these intermittent bursts, the retelling of my fighting game learning journey will stop its perfectly dated continuity here, because I want to say, right around that several hours of playing the same guy in the Gio-Zato matchup, it did hit. I kind of got fighting games now. I was at a point where I was largely competent. I certainly wasn't good. I mean, even now I would consider myself below average to average at absolute best at fighters, but I kinda got it. I could play while forming actual thoughts about my gameplay. Instead of being focused on how to do something, effectively my micro, I was now focused on what to do, my macro. I could actually think about what was happening rather than just having to accept it and work around it. Though I would still find it hard to put those thoughts into actual sentences, I could tell when I needed to throw out more lows or more grabs. I didn't know why I needed to, but I could tell that I did, and I was starting to actually learn the dance as opposed to just the steps. But just before understanding this dance, my friend did something. She bought me a new fighting game, Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus Or. Shit reads like an isekai light novel title. I'll lay out with this. This is one of the worst experiences I have had in a fighting game. I hated every moment of playing this game. Now, was a massive part of it just me being terrible at the game? Absolutely. A solid 70% of why is just that shallow reason. 10% is that the sound design of this game drives me mental because I liked Jam the most since she felt kinda similar to Giovanna, who is only added to the Guilty Gear series in Strive. And hearing this... every time I used to move was not it. Another 10 was that the game bugged out on my PC all the time and would never have a functioning window. And the final 10? If you skip the content warning from earlier, then this date means nothing to you. But I do have a reason for bringing this up. In the first place, I do appreciate what my friend, the same one who first got me started on this fighting game adventure, thanks to teaching me how to stop sign and Undernight, was doing here. Giving me a new game, one which she enjoyed since she's not a Strive fan so we could play together, was really nice of her. And in the first place, I do not think that Plus Or is a bad game at all. It's actually something different. There's just one small problem. I did not learn Guilty Gear Strive, nor did I actually learn fighting games up to this point. I learned Giovanna. Just for the uninitiated, when it comes to Giovanna's tools in Strive, she doesn't really have a traditional running dash. Instead, she has a step dash, letting her go a certain distance forward or backward immediately. The majority of the Strive cast instead has a regular running dash. After inputting your dash command, they'll start booking it. The only issue is that this had just a slight smidgen of startup before the run actually starts, or more accurately, there's an acceleration to the run, which compared to Giovanna, who has none at all, didn't feel as nice to me. Now, some of you may know that Plus Or functions differently here. That acceleration doesn't really exist in the same way. It still does, but dashes feel nearly instant after the input is given, and that seems near perfect for me, right? Well, that's where things start to get muddy. When playing Strive, I obviously remap my buttons. This is something I do in nearly every game I play. I saw that there were unbound buttons, so I thought I may as well fill them in. My Roman cancels became left bumper, Faultless Defense became left trigger, Burst became pushing my left stick inward because I'm a psychopath, and Dash became right trigger. And I'd say most Guilty Gear players have already found the problem. 1. I played Giovanna, and 2. I played her with the game's dash macro, something you need to do if you are playing her, but something that also hurts you the instant you're outside of Strive. Something you need to understand about me is I like fluidity, and to me, fluidity comes from control. If a game controls nicely, it feels fluid. One of my favorite things about Overwatch is that there is no movement acceleration. You're at full speed all the time. In most shooters, there is an acceleration before you get to full speed, so things like strafing are slower, and this is something that I can turn into a whole tangent or even a whole video about how, in my opinion, there is more to movement than momentum. A lot of games I see people praise as movement shooters, or just good movement games, are entirely momentum based. Conserve your momentum well and get rewarded with insane speeds. And don't get me wrong, this is super fun. I love Ultra Kill, and Rolling Rascal is one of my favorite indie projects right now, and Pathfinder and Apex told me that I really just need to try out Titanfall 2 already. But in all of these games, there isn't an immediate speed option. You need to work to build up your speed again. Again, very fun and rewarding, and something that works great in these games as that's the intention. But I think there's something to be said about breaking the laws of physics when it comes to movement. Being able to immediately stop yourself with no slowdowns and go in the complete opposite direction just as quickly is a different type of speed. One that certainly has a lower potential in terms of how fast you actually can go, but that offers even tighter feeling control that feels satisfying to me. I find there to be two sides to the movement coin, momentum and immediacy, and while I love both, I want to see more of the immediacy because it requires a different type of skill to play with, and compared to momentum-based mechanics, it just offers some more variety in the movement department of games. Getting back to the fighting games though, I love Giovanna so much because Step Dash has this level of control. She nearly instantly dashes forwards and backwards. I get to pretend I know how to play neutral, it's great. What I'm saying is that the rest of the Strive cast didn't stand out to me much because most had movement acceleration that made the game feel slower. But what was about Plusor that I didn't like? I had to play the game like a normal human being. There's no dash macro in Plusor, you have to double tap the D-pad. Not a problem at all in my mind until I'm mid-game, where this causes my dashes, which are meant to be fairly fast, to not be. Is this a stupid problem to have? Absolutely. Oh my god, it's so dumb. But I think it highlights something important. Firstly, none of the Plusor cast who had a step dash had one that felt like Giovanna's, so I just didn't gel with them, leading me to Jam, a character with a normal dash and a big dash move because I like the big funny neutral skip buttons. The problem part of why I didn't fuck with it though is that I couldn't rebind my buttons. Not too bad for things like Roman cancelling, but having no dash macro, it effectively gave me movement acceleration, as I have to walk forward for a couple frames before hitting a full run. And more notably than that, and I think a larger part of why I didn't really like it that much, was that it really hurt my hands. Remember, I'm playing fighting games on the controller you give your friends when they come over, and the comfortable way to hold this has my thumb on the movement options. Since I couldn't use the dash macro, my thumb was now on dash duty and motion input duty, and honestly, I'm starting to think there's just something wrong with my hands because this should not hurt that much. This could probably be avoided if I just used a different controller, either a lever or a hitbox, but at that point in time, I was just starting to build muscle memory and I did not have the patience to go back to square one and relearn how to hit buttons. So my first attempt at trying to learn a new fighting game while understanding the genre somewhat failed miserably. From a mix of my own personal problems and inadequacies, but also a trend in recent fighting games aiming to make them more accessible to newcomers. As said newcomer, I'm just going to step forward and say, I kind of appreciate this. To me, fighting games are a kind of genre where if you don't get into it when you're younger, getting into it when you're older is intimidating because you're more aware of what's in store for you, and more importantly, you're aware of what you're doing wrong. So the genre being made more accessible with things like control mapping or non-motion input control schemes is a good thing. But training wheels are great, but after a certain point they become a liability in your learning. They're brilliant at helping players become acclimated to the genre, but most players who use these options aren't likely to turn them off. I mean, I'm never removing my dash macro in Strive, and while I eventually did get used to just being a normal human, we've already seen how my first foray into a dash macro-less world went. Mechanics to help new players will do their job, but when these new players try older games, or even just other fighters that don't feature the same mechanics, they'll be met with a wall of difficulty. A wall that, as humans, makes us more inclined to run away if it seems too difficult to scale. That's exactly what happened to me with something as simple and admittedly as stupid as a dash macro. So imagine how bad it is for someone who uses modern controls or auto combos. Fighting games are hard to learn, that is a stone cold take, but the way this fact tries to be helped isn't nearly with methods that actually help players learn, but rather mechanics that delay or stop their learning entirely. I mean, it's like giving someone the ability to have perfect English grammar, except you didn't teach them how to spell. And while the fact that these training wheels do make other games harder to learn is a big problem, in my case the dash macro wasn't exactly the main issue. The bigger problem lies outside of that, because I was a one-trick. Around January or February in 2025 was when this realization was made. I loved Giovanna, but I also couldn't play anyone else at all. I needed to diversify my pool a little, because in all my other games I could play multiple characters to stop myself from getting bored. And while I don't enjoy most of the Strive cast too much because of my thoughts on how the acceleration felt, I decided I should at least give it another try, being better at the game now, to see if I can actually get a secondary, leading me to none other than Chip Zanoff. I wasn't exactly sure why he felt so nice to play. I assume it's just because I was better at the game and I had something to work off of, which made playing him feel more natural, but also I just really loved his super. So I just continued to play him for a while, though I never learned a proper combo with him because I just found them all way too hard, and spoiler alert, when I play Strive now, I'm back to one-tricking Giovanna since I just didn't invest enough time in Chip to truly enjoy him. But the important thing about this is that it was proof I had improved. I was trying something new in Strive, sure, but still, I was seeing success on something I previously never could have, even if I stopped playing this new thing after only a month. Right after this point, there wasn't much noteworthy for some time. I had finally gotten competent enough at the genre that I could play at college or ask some friends to play the game without feeling like I was wasting their time. It's always a problem that I have had, specifically in fighting games. If I'm way worse than my opponent, I end up feeling bad because they don't get anything out of the experience. I was basically just the same as the training range dummy. This is something that I still feel, and I truly don't get why. I think a portion of it may come from the toxicity of early Overwatch ranked when I was 12 or 13, but I was also just as bad as the people I played with back then, and I cannot repeat the things that I have heard when I play League, so really I don't think that could be it. Either way, thinking back on that time since I first played Chip, I find it strange that I never even tried playing other characters. When I played Overwatch the first time, you'd swear I was playing mystery heroes with how much I swapped between characters, but in fighters, I was barely trying other games. I mean, even in League, while I did effectively one-trick Warwick for a month or so, I eventually started playing other characters, to the point where I can play the majority of the League cast quite competently, which is well over 100. Now realistically, the answer is quite simple. The mechanical complexity, ceiling, and even straight up options of a fighting game character vastly outweigh that of a hero shooter character. Even in Marvel Rivals, or feck it, even Deadlock, both games where characters can sometimes have 6, 7, or even more abilities available to them at any one time, that barely covers just the special moves of most characters in Strive. And don't even ask me what the hell is going on in Tekken, that menu scares me. I think another element is definitely still in the fact that I like my longer, macro-intensive games too much. Fighters never quite get the grip on me that they do, so the idea of learning a whole new character, new matchups, combos, all that just doesn't entice me as much when I can stick to dog missiling all over the stage, because while there are definitely transferables between some characters that make them easier to pick up, compare that to Overwatch where I'd be playing Genji, Ana, Pharah, Winston, and then Mei, all in the span of an hour or two. All characters are not an insane amount of overlap because the overall mechanics of the game stay similar between them. It's a lot easier to have more focus on their unique aspects. I mean, any fighter, you'll see charts of move speed, gravity, health, jump squat, traction, acceleration, and about 20 other buzzwords between all the characters, which make them all different right down to their control. And that's ignoring the unique mechanics that some will have, whether it's my beloved step dash or Potemkin's lack of a basic dash entirely. In hero shooters or MOBAs, this is barely a thing, or at minimum the differences will be on the simpler end, typically just different move speed values or other such stats. The car is still the same, it's just that the pedals have been replaced, not the vehicle itself. But while I was both uninterested and intimidated by the idea of trying some other characters in Strive, I wasn't uninterested in trying new games. In fact, there was one I had been interested in for quite some time, and on May 1st, 2025, I picked up Street Fighter 6. And I sucked. Really badly. SF6 is about as traditional of a fighter as you're gonna get in the modern era as far as I was concerned, and I also just thought that the style of the game was cool and had seen SK's adventure in trying it out beforehand, and as such I thought it was about time to give a new game a try. After taking a small look through the base roster, because I am not buying DLC characters when I barely know the names of the regular ones, I locked in Cammy and started having a mess around in the training range. It felt very different to Strive. I was obviously expecting some things, but also it still felt familiar. It's like going from learning a new language entirely to learning a language in the same family as your native one. Fun fact, Spanish and Irish have some very similar names for the days of the week. The game was noticeably slower, but it didn't feel bad at all, and while there was no dash macro, it didn't actually bother me, nor cause any hand pain like +R. I'd say there were two main factors. One in the fact that, like I just said, the game is slower. You generally don't need to be dashing, but the bigger one was how dashes weren't runs, but rather closer to Giovanna's step dash, which I think was a huge help in getting me to adapt. And the second factor? It had been nearly a year since I last tried +R, and I was significantly better at the genre at this point, and also significantly less depressed. So learning a new system felt far less daunting, but that didn't mean that there were no problems in trying to pick this up. For example, I'm so tired of this button boss. Low skill SF6 is full of drive rush spam, myself included, because I really don't know how to find an opening to perform my combo beyond getting a stun and then raising up from light to heavy to a special. It also doesn't help that at random times in gameplay, my Giovanna muscle memory would kick in like a sleeper agent, and I'd suddenly be hitting medium kick into down medium punch, thinking I was going for close slash into down heavy slash. It was a problem. There are a few other small things about SF6 I noted as I was learning, but honestly, after a couple more hours of playing, I just wasn't really feeling it. There wasn't even a particular reason, I just didn't dislike the game, but I mean sure there were grab loops that were annoying and my reaction timing to drive rush was on par with an Alzheimer's patient, but I didn't dislike the game at all, I just stopped playing one day and went back to CrossCode. And just as before, my fighting game fanaticism faded for a few months. I played some Strive for an hour or two, but that summer was defined by single player games, until August 2025 where I was invited to my first fighting game local. To people in big cities or even smaller ones with at least a decent audience, you may wonder why this seems like a big deal. Firstly, where I live, at the time anyway, there were no fighting game locals, and even if there were, I was not about to head off to them when I could barely respond to someone jumping at me, since a Z input attempt would result in a whiff Sajam himself couldn't excuse from a new player. It was the same problem as before. I didn't want to feel like I was wasting my opponent's time, so whenever I saw a mini event being held at my college, I'd never take part in it for that reason. I've already mentioned this, but my skill was low and my confidence was lower, and as such I didn't want to feel like I was wasting people's time. It was the coward's way out really, an excuse for me to just not go and not make my way out to a social event so I could stay inside and play more CrossCode. I mean, it's a good game. But this time, not only had I built up at least a little confidence in Strive, which was one of the games being played at said local, but my friends were going, so I thought for a bit of fun I'd head off with them. So in the lead up to the local, I spent a little time reading through Giovanna's Dust Loop to finally actually learn which of her moves were worth it and what they actually do. I also decided to just do a little more labbing, and with this being my first fighting game local, and knowing that I wanted to make a video on it at some point, I also decided that I would document my experience. Except I lost half the footage at some point within the last year, so all we have to work with is this brief overview as my thoughts as I head out to the train station. So let's give it a listen. It's like 8:30 in the morning. The train is, to be fair, not that early. It's 9 o'clock, but you know, that's early when you do the shit that I do. So, for like the last week, at the moment I'm working a 9 to 5. So for the last week, I haven't really had much of a chance to play Strive. I got a bit of a chance last night to finally play on the new patch. Now Giovanna didn't receive many changes on it. They didn't like change a horrific amount about Giovanna. They did like just straight up buff one of her moves. It comes out way quicker now. So I'm definitely gonna try and make better use of that, because it's gonna be a pretty good punish tool. But lads, I'm playing so badly. Honest to God. Not only is this my first fighting game local, I don't play fighting games that often, at least as often as I would actually enjoy to. And also, the people who are going to be there are like definitely going to be far more into this game than I am. Honestly, if I can take a round, I think I'll be kind of happy. If I can get around, I think it will be good. Otherwise, you know, I think I'm gonna 0-2 in record time, but we'll find out. Either way, I'm excited for it, but I'm not optimistic. Would you believe me if I said this was higher confidence than previous? Since I had been working all week, I didn't actually have much time to practice. Honestly, the most noteworthy practice I did was reading through Giovanna's Dust Loop during work hours, which I had mentioned previously but skipped over. Why did I never do this before? While the frame data wasn't massively important to me, like I'm not memorizing the exact amount of frames that I'm plus or minus on block, I'm not at that point in the obsession yet, but knowing what moves were plus or minus, and finding out what works as good Okizeme, finding out what Okizeme even was in the first place, it ended up feeling like my options flooded open. I knew what moves were going to be good in certain scenarios, I got less scared when someone jumped around too much, and best of all, I felt even better at keeping pressure up after a combo. Unfortunately, I barely had the time to put these theories into practice, but I was getting ideas in my head on what to do even outside of the game, and in my case, this is how you can tell a game has gripped me. Allow me to give an example from my recent Magic the Gathering obsession. I bought the Ashling Elemental Precon, and for all the non-Magic players, all you need to know is that this deck plays big, expensive creatures for cheap, and gets their explosive effects when they enter the battlefield only to kill them immediately, make a copy of them for a second entry trigger, and then kill that copy. And you may think, that sounds great, but if you kill your creatures when they enter, how will you keep bodies to block damage on board? And I was thinking that exact same thing, wondering how I could go about it until the answer quite literally came to me in a dream. I had a dream one night where I added a card buried in my collection to the deck, one which revives creatures to the battlefield with a slight handicap after they die, giving me a third entry trigger and undoing the weakness. I added this card to the deck, and in the very next game I played, I got it onto the field and later got a turn so perfect it won me the game, returning all my powerful creatures to the field with big boosts to their power for lethal damage. But what does this have to do with fighting games? Once I start thinking about a game, whether it's how to improve or different strategies or whatever it may be, outside of actually playing the game, that's how I know it's gotten my attention. I mean, for years during school, I'd be thinking during class about different builds or routes to try and league. And because of this, I really started to look forward to this local. I knew I wasn't going to do well, but I really didn't mind. I simply just wanted to play the game and hopefully take a round. So we got the train, grabbed some breakfast before bracket started, and made our way down to the venue. I was pretty nervous despite knowing very little was at stake, but regardless, I made my way in alongside my friends to my first fighting game local, ready to see what was in store for me. Someone brought milk, so that's why I've not been playing well. Any tension that I was feeling was immediately gone, replaced with laughter before bracket started. I registered for Strive as my main event, but decided just to get the experience, I'll also put myself up for Street Fighter 6 alongside the Killer Instinct bracket my friend was running. So how did bracket go? I lost every single game. I mean, what did you expect? Strive was my strongest showing. I took a couple of rounds, but never any full games. I was proud of myself regardless because I was really expecting to just get completely shut out. SF6 and KI were a complete stomp, but honestly, I was just in those for the fun of it. Once I got knocked out of bracket, I began playing a couple friendlies with people. First in SF6 since it had more free setups, and I have to say, I was playing the wrong character. I gave Jury a try and she clicked immediately. I really loved how she felt to play. Ignore the last recorded date of me playing SF6 in my own home though. But really, the whole experience was great. I started running Strive friendlies against one lad there, and we just kept going for well over an hour until one of my friends came over to tell us that the train was leaving in 20 minutes and that we needed to run to catch it. I had a very wrong impression about locals. It's not about the bracket, but just being a dedicated time to play fighting games with other people who love them. Though it definitely helps that they light a fire in me to want to try and do well, since I just expect to lose in these games. Fighting games are simply a genre where offline is just better, and the local is proof of that. It was just such a fun time with my friends. We proceeded to never go to that local again. I also completely forgot to mention that during EVO weekend, I went on a bit of a fighting game adventure. I played some Gran Blue and Rivals of Either 2. Rivals 2 was actually how I learned something quite important. I don't really enjoy platform fighters. And really it was just the one thing, which is the fact that my character doesn't always face the direction my stick points threw me way off. Really fun genre when I don't feel like the controls are fighting against me, but this quirk bugs me way too much for me to really sink my teeth into them, which is why I'm not talking about them much here. It was just so irritating. But even talking about it here seems so silly, but I feel like a lot of people know what I'm saying with this. Anyway, so after the local, I finally got it. Even if I'm always the person losing, there's something about playing fighting games and just laughing along with the person next to you when you do something stupid that's just plain fun to me. It also made me realize something that needs to change. The Xbox controller that I had been using wasn't going to be compatible with most setups if I ever wanted to go out to other locals. And also, the thing causing my hands to hurt was the controller, not my hands themselves. So it was time to upgrade. This is the Hori Fight Pad, or as I prefer to call it, the Doohickey controller. Fully digital buttons, bumpers, and triggers. A control stick that I never use but that feels really nice to play with while waiting for my opponent to lock in their character or waiting for the game to load. fully customizable buttons across the entire thing, even being able to switch the mode of the controller to PC, PS5 or PS4 to play on basically any setup ever so long as I have my USB adapter in case I'm ever playing on the Switch. That's never happened though. I love this controller. It has made so much about my gameplay so much more comfortable, especially playing Giovanna now that my dash macro is a digital button as opposed to an analog trigger. The D-pad is a little strange at times, but I really like it overall. It also got me interested in actually giving other controllers a go, going full digital with a box type controller, or trying a more traditional joystick are ones that I really want to try, but controllers are expensive as fuck, man. I don't got that kind of money. I'm addicted to Magic right now. I won't say my gameplay improved upon getting this controller, but it definitely felt smoother, and that alone made it worth the pickup in my eyes. A new controller and this proper newfound love of fighting games also really made me look forward to new games coming out in the genre, like Marvel Tokon, Avatar, and 2XKO. As I've mentioned numerous times, I used to play a lot of League, so when I heard there was going to be a new fighting game using League characters, I was excited. Using League characters. I did get into the first public beta, but never actually had the time to give it a proper go, though that was, of course, until Warwick released. Warwick is my League main. Since day one of me trying League for the first time back in 2018, he was who I chose, and I stuck with him the entire time. While it's been rare for me to return to League over the last year or so, whenever I do, I'm always playing at least a few games of Warwick. So when he was released in, I hate this name by the way, I decided I was going to make the time and learn how to actually play. This was my first tag fighter and it was confusing. It's unique in the genre of fighting games that you really can't just main one character as I have up to this point, meaning to get started you have to learn not one but two characters alongside their buttons and their combos. Or not. Tag fighters are definitely a hurdle taller in terms of complexity compared to more traditional ones, making them even harder for newcomers. So Riot, wanting to make a new player-friendly fighting game, said you can just choose not to. And at this point, I'm no longer learning these games as a hero shooter player, but as a fighting game player. I know 2XKO is way easier to pick up as far as fighting games go, but I really got into it quite quickly, only taking about a week of Warwick and a couple days of Blitzcrank to find my Glue Eater combo. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't really enjoy labbing, and while in practice for the local, Strive did get me a little bit less apprehensive to do it, 2XKO genuinely made me start enjoying it. Trying to find different routes and make my own combo instead of blindly following whatever random ones I saw online was actually fun. I think a decent chunk of this enjoyment stemmed from how new the game and character were, so the amount of resources paled in comparison to the other games that I was playing, so I effectively had to do research on my own, which made it way more fun to just discover the character. This game taught me the joys of learning solo again instead of just relying on someone else's work, just like how it was when I first learned Overwatch. While I'm no longer thinking about these games from my old obsession-fueled lens, it doesn't change how they remind me of it. While I did watch a lot of random guides and videos when I wasn't actually able to play the game, I remember being addicted to the old CarQ1 tip series. I got to Diamond in Overwatch largely just discovering stuff by myself. I was so engrossed and obsessed with the game that while losing a fight or game would frustrate me, the first thing I would do was think about why it happened, and then come around to try something else instead of just bashing my head into the wall doing the same thing over and over. Now, I still wouldn't go into the training mode or anything like that to practice. Back then, and even more so now, I still think it's better to play with your brain turned on, but that was my problem while mid-game in fighters. Sure, I'd realize that an opponent loves to block low too much, or that they're obsessed with jumping in, I could come up with some answers, but if I found an opponent who got used to my bread and butter, I was neutralized, I panicked, and I would have nothing. The honest-to-God enjoyment labbing Warwick created was reminding me of the times of learning Overwatch when I was a teen, and also made me realize that while playing the game with my brain on and adapting is great and all, it doesn't matter if my brain isn't good enough, and the only way to fix that was with a bit of practice. But there's another aspect about this that lit a fire in me to really want to learn. I had a teammate. I'm in the games club at my college, we already mentioned this way at the beginning, and we had started hosting locals every Thursday, which I would attend when my 9 to 5 wasn't leaving me with the energy of a slug. One week it was decided that the one-off bracket would be 2XKO, allowing single or teamed player entrance, so myself and a friend who had already been playing 2XKO together decided to team up for the local. This is something I found quite special about 2XKO, something that gave it a real bit of uniqueness in the fact that 4 players could play at once. Not only is this great in in-person environments because having 4 people laughing at a ridiculous play is just better than 2, but it also feels much more satisfying. I know you can do doubles in plat fighters, but in more traditional ones, I have never heard of multiplayer outside of Tekken Tag 2. But the people at college don't like when I lock in the bear and Panda together, so I'm really not sure what I can say about that. Having played team games for about 8 years in PvP scenarios, I've just come to prefer them. Sure, the lows are most certainly lower, whether it's because of you or a teammate. Losing just because one person was holding the team back feels awful, but the highs are unbelievably higher. Playing Overwatch scrims on a competitive level in actual coordinated environments are some of the most fun I had ever had, because when something works thanks to the entire team coming together, it feels incredible. And another thing I like about them is that they create less anxiety, but that doesn't mean less tension. Being able to trust that your teammate can handle something, allowing you to focus more on the task at hand, just feels great. Now, acquiring that trust is a different matter, but I find it comes quite easily. Just knowing that there's another person adding to the mental load of the opponents helps reduce mine. But also knowing that I have a team behind me not only just makes me feel like I'm aura farming when I hit a clip, but it also just makes me want to do better. This may very well be indicative of a larger problem for myself, but in team games, I always feel horrific when I'm the reason a fight or a game was lost. And this feeling makes me strive to do better. I don't want to let the team down, I don't want to let my friends down, so I really want to work out how to get better so I don't disappoint them next time. In fighters, you're often by yourself. It's just you and your opponent. Now, I don't mean to say that I dislike 1v1s, not at all, but they just don't hit the same highs as team environments do to me. Sure, popping off when you hit a mad combo feels great, but popping off with a group of people when the effort of everyone got the result you wanted feels even better. But also, because I'm by myself, my drive to improve isn't gone, but lessened. Oh, I lost while my opponent was just better than me, it makes sense. I don't get too angry at my losses in fighters because I recognize a lot of the time I just got outplayed or I just misplayed. It doesn't mean that I don't think of how to improve or that I want to avoid challenging opponents, but the pang of annoyance isn't there like how it is when I'm the reason my team lost. I'm nearly always the reason that I lost in a 1v1, so I won't feel as bad when I lose. But by extension, this means I don't feel as dire a need to improve as I do when I'm with a team. But 2xKO does have teams, and this changed a lot. The local was in less than a week, so with a fire in me that wanted to win and take it home with my duo, we got to work.
Murder. I was like, I don't want to head. Wait, Leo, are you into fart stuff, or is that the other person?
That was Patrick. We've been going to school together since we were about 12, though it wasn't until college where he really became one of my best friends. I honestly love him so much. He's also probably watching this and had no idea that I'd be mentioning him, and is gonna kill me for including that clip. Be happy I'm not posting our root gameplay, boss. Patrick is honestly way better at fighting games than I am. I can consistently beat him in Strive, but that's it. Every other fighter we play is either 50-50 at best, or 70-30 at minimum in his favor. Because of this, I knew I was going to be the weak link of our duo, so I really wanted to get better in time, which just made it even more fun. I was finding Blitzcrank and Warwick to be the most interesting despite being the genuine glue eater combo they were, so I said I'd rotate between the two. Patrick settled on 3 characters himself, Warwick being one of them, so it was effectively just 2 half the time in Braum and Teemo. Listen, he may be one of my best friends and one of the best people I've ever known, but that doesn't mean he's in the cunt too. As we played in practice, I was genuinely having some of the most fun I'd ever had in a fighter. Our Warwick and Braum was a strange combo, but not only was it strong, they complemented each other quite well. Braum helped Warwick approach safely, meanwhile Warwick could keep the gaps in Braum's pressure active, making his combos deadly. And while he was definitely still better than me, it was because of that I wanted to improve. It was a fighter that gave me the same magic Overwatch did all those years ago. And when the day of the local arrived, we got second. And I was the reason why. In the Grand Finals, we had a juggernaut opponent extremely low. He was panicking and going for risky jump-ins, and I completely whiffed my anti-air spacing, losing us that match. But even though it was my fault and it annoyed me a lot, it still felt incredible to see our work pay off. Duos in 2xKO are amazing, not only for the feeling of teamwork going right, but also the mental load. Even with the simplicity of its controls, at the end of the day, 2xKO is a tag fighter, which is just a tough genre to get into, as I've already mentioned. Not only do you need to keep your current character's moves in mind, but also the moves of the character in the back, and how all the characters on the team can work together, and in the cases where you can swap the character you're controlling after an assist, you need to quickly rewire your brain from who you were to who you are. And while you can pick it up with some practice obviously, it's just a lot to have to do, and I find it just adds to the difficulty of the mid-game, because you need to recognize what tool of your hundreds is potentially useful in the current scenario, while keeping in mind the enemy has just as many. By having another player on your side, you don't need to think nearly as much about when to call in a support, your duo just does it. It also means that if you're going for combos where you call in a support for a hit, then swap the said support to turn into a combo for the other player, it can add to the mental stack of your opponents while reducing yours. Not only because you don't need to know how to do the combo your partner is doing, but also because your partner could have an entirely different set of habits to you, meaning they need to respond to an entirely different style of play, even if your characters operate similarly. Patrick has a really good grab game. I fear what would happen if he opened a casino because the house would only win. I, on the other hand, would like to believe my mix-ups are at least pretty decent and what I like to go for the most. This makes blocking a pain and a half for our opponents. High or low, grab or raw super, we don't even know, so how will you? Because neither of us are worried about how to play multiple characters at once, and because of how our swaps would confuse our opponents, the breadth of knowledge we needed was definitely smaller, but our depth of knowledge became deeper. It was a different type of complexity, one that was entirely unique to me among fighting games, and I loved it. But complexity and 2xKO are a very, very strange discussion, and there's also a reason I've been referring to the game in the past tense so much. I've already mentioned the tag fighter nature and how Riot wanting it to be a beginner-friendly fighting game are already at odds with each other, and no matter what you do, whether it's Juggernaut or auto combos, those alone won't help new players get into the game. But what is one of the greatest struggles new players have when it comes to fighting games? As always, it comes back to motion inputs. I'm not going to dance around it, motion inputs are stupid, and the people who refuse to take any time to learn them are from Jupiter. More accurately, I think the way motion inputs are taught and discussed is horrific, but despite that, to me, saying motion inputs are pointless or bad is like saying needing to aim to do damage in Overwatch is bad design. I definitely think having options is good. I really prefer when a game gives a player a choice when it comes to controls. I nearly always remap them in every game I play. I like what SF6 has going on. You can pick if you want to have motion inputs or not, you get that choice, and to make up for it, having no motion inputs makes your moves weaker in terms of damage. In the same vein, Overwatch has characters like Mercy, Reinhardt, these characters whose primary strengths don't need much aim. So when I was first playing Overwatch, with it being my first ever FPS and having no aim to speak of, I played these two. But now I'm a DPS main. One of my favorite characters is Tracer, one of the most aim-dependent characters in the game. I don't mind offering new players a crutch, but isn't the most fun part of a game learning and improving? And it's mechanics like these that keep players engaged. Mechanics with clear, tangible proof that you have improved that make things fun. I understand being frustrated losing to someone who just has better aim, or being annoyed when your actual input is different from what you had planned and now you're doing a different move, but also, that's the point. Motion inputs are a balance mechanic in and of themselves. You want to anti-air this guy? Well, the input is forward, down, and forward, down. At no point in this input are you blocking, leaving you vulnerable if you don't have good timing or if you just flub it. You want to use your big super to escape the corner? I'm going to swap to numpad notation for my own sanity, but 632146 has some key inputs where you're still vulnerable. It also just takes longer, meaning you can't just push one button for safety. It adds delay to moves. It creates moments where you have to be intentional and can't just button mash. It's the same in Overwatch. Tracer's sticky bomb is hard to hit, but if you stick it on a squishy target, it's usually a guaranteed kill. Sometimes difficulty can just be its own balancing mechanic. You're not meant to hit every shot. That's why headshots are rewarded so well in every shooter ever. You're not meant to hit this mess of a super easily, which is why it does so much damage. There are definitely times where the drawback of a mechanic being how hard it is to pull off can backfire and remove the weakness when players get good enough. And in some cases, that's fine, and in others, it's a severe problem. And in the cases where that doesn't happen, which from what I know it isn't too common for that to happen in fighters, was the existence of the other person being able to do motion inputs really all that was stopping you from winning? Was it really that? because I'm just saying, this person being able to do motion inputs means that they have put in the practice to learn them. Under what circumstance were you owed a victory or even a fair chance when you haven't even respected the effort they made, let alone made your own? I mean, it's like saying the 3-point line should be moved in basketball so teenagers can make shots easier, or saying that 4 touches should be allowed in volleyball instead of 3 for teams with less coordination. Things are made to be difficult for a reason. It's no fun if there's no friction. There's no tension. The anxiety of losing is what makes winning so fun. How do you have fun in anything if you don't try and just run from what's difficult? How will you grow if you get spoon-fed success? Why play games if you don't want to engage with them? The discussion around motion inputs just drives me mental. Whether it's the notation or the actual inputs themselves, some of you fighting game players have to stick so far up your asses I swear you'd be able to get to the bottom of the traffic cone, because none of you can seem to remember what it's like to learn an entirely new genre that feels like a whole new language. Motion inputs are very important to the genre, yes, but there's also nothing wrong with new players who mess them up or find them annoying. Any hurdle in learning is going to annoy you. That's what makes learning feel so fun when you finally overcome the mountain. You can certainly ridicule people who don't even try to learn, who run away from any roadblock they encounter, who say that the system should be changed to accommodate them and their cowardice, but that same disrespect is just as often sent towards new players who are simply expressing their frustrations in their journey with trying something new. And in 2XKO, they chose the route of the cowards. I did really enjoy this game and I was playing it a lot, but one thing that always bothered me was the lack of motion inputs. I certainly wouldn't mind if it was a choice, like in SF6, but it wasn't a choice. It gave a mostly traditional tag fighter the controls of a plat fighter, which just makes no sense as the default and only option because, again, this choice was made to help new players learn. But not only is the move list just as long and confusing as any other fighter, with 6 buttons minimum and different command movement inputs, compared to something like Strive with a minimum of 4 buttons and movement, and again, remember, this is a tag fighter, known to not be a beginner-friendly genre. How exactly would the removal of motion inputs help anyone in learning a tag fighter? So much about 2XKO has such backwards design decisions, whether it's just the weird as hell name or the... oh my god. 10 years of development for not even 10 months of life and the direction of the game being changed again. 2XKO really could have been something new, something cool, but not only did they barely scratch the surface of what's possible with these character choices, having over a third of the roster be arcane characters and another third be characters already featured in different League IP games. I remember when I first heard about 2XKO, I was thinking about all the ways different characters could be made. One of my favorite ideas was Gnar, a character who, in League, swaps from being a tiny little guy who pokes his enemies to a massive monster who brawls through opponents. A zoner who randomly turns into a grappler? That sounds cool as all fuck. Or Mordekaiser. His super could have been something that disables supports and tag-ins, turning the tag fighter into a 1v1. Breaking the rules of the genre is sometimes what creates the most fun gameplay. And instead of these, some characters on the horizon are what looked like a mobile game ripoff of Akali and Senna. Now Senna, I think, could have been quite cool, but the fact Caitlyn was already added makes her potential addition feel less special. Hearing all this and seeing it in action just made me frustrated. The first time a fighting game was going to be new to me, the first time one gripped me in a different way than the others and genuinely gave me some of the same experiences my hero shooter obsessed brain felt, and it just shot itself in the foot. I do hope 2XKO could somehow make a comeback, but it's not looking good. And with 2XKO behind me, I started searching for another fighting game, something that could hopefully scratch the same itch it did. And I then found Undernight Inbirth 2 on sale on Steam, and I got it. I played it. I tried to play it. Unfortunately, I could nearly never find people online to play Uni 2 with when I wanted a queue, and my friends who did play it at college were often too busy to actually hop on for games online, so unfortunately, the game that originally got me interested in fighters is struggling to be in my life. Huge thank you to Ray though, she played with me for what I think was like 2 hours straight one day, it was so fun. And when I thought about it for a moment, searching for new fighters wasn't really gonna work out. I mean, with my track record, Purposely trying to find a new fighting game for the sake of getting into it, instead of just finding my way there naturally, was not going to work out. So continuing on with life was the better option. I attended my college local every time Strive was on, but it was also around this point I really started to get into Magic, so that's where a lot of my energy went with learning another new game. That is, of course, until I was 4 Copperbergs deep and had a GameCube controller passed into my hands. I lied earlier. I like Melee. I was at Patrick's birthday back in February this year. We were drinking, naturally, and Melee was on the TV. Now, I mentioned earlier how I'm not huge on plat fighters competitively, but I do enjoy some Smash Bros silliness. I was watching the actual Melee players play before one of them passed a controller to another friend of ours who had never played a game of Smash in his life. He locked in Samus, and being too inebriated to actually understand the controls, he passed the controller to me, who was trying to help him actually figure it out. I started playing, and Samus was really fun. Something funny I noticed about the characters I play in fighters is, with the exception of Blitzcrank Hook if you wanted to count that, not a single character I have gravitated towards has actually had a projectile. With my favorite in Smash usually being Kirby, you'd think in Melee I gravitate towards Puff, but Samus just felt good. Her regular attacks had a satisfying weight to them, her control and movement felt more natural to me than Fox, who I had tried before, and this was a case where I actually was a big fan of the projectiles. Usually I'm not one for zoners, but at the very least in Melee I definitely enjoy forcing the enemy to play to my tune, while also having the speed to keep up with them. Ignore the frame 1 option in the room. Now, a big downside with me suddenly getting into Melee is that with college work, I've barely found the time to actually make this video, let alone practice Melee. But I feel like once I get that chance, I'm gonna go from enjoying Melee to loving it. I'm also really excited and hopeful that learning more Melee will make me better and capable of enjoying other plat fighters as a whole, because Rivals 2 and a few quick matches both look really fun, and just having more games that I could play with my friends is nothing but a good thing in my eyes. Unfortunately, I can't add much more. I started playing Melee far too recently to have any actual analysis on it, beyond the fact that turning around in this game drives me demented still sometimes, but honestly, I'm just happy that I've come far enough in enjoying and being able to at least play this wonderful genre. I even travelled out to a Melee major in Ireland, Take Laser Dashback, and while I did horrifically lose in pools, the fact I was playing against some of the top players and shocking them with my recovery was really funny and kind of nice for my confidence. There is something amazing about hearing, "What do I do?" as I'm off stage slowly making my way back before hearing some laughter behind me that is just hilarious. I also entered Amis, basically a second bracket for the less skilled players who lost in pools, and was inches away from actually making it kinda far, before a mistaken counterpicking was made where I brought a Falco to Final Destination. I genuinely think had I not done that, I could have had that game. But you know something? I was reflecting on that after the game. This major made me sink one level deeper into loving fighters. Fighting games are hard, and while some aspects of them are similar to my favourite genres of all time in hero shooters and MOBAs, there's a lot about them that habits from my main games really made difficult. But over the last year and a half, I think I can finally say it. I'm a fighting game player. I'm not good at them, I'm barely average, but that's not what's important, nor was it ever the goal. I didn't start playing these to become a top level player. When I was 12 and getting into Overwatch for the first time, while I did have friends, I was lonely. I didn't have anyone I could earnestly talk about my interests with. I was the only nerd in my class, and the friends I had outside of my actual class I couldn't talk to that often. I mean, being on PC and my only other console being a Switch meant I barely could play games with anyone anyway, so all I had was to just get good at Overwatch. Yes, that was because I enjoyed it, and the learning was mostly passive, but I still wanted to learn and improve. But when Fortnite really became big and got crossplay, I started playing with people from school, and I was way better than basically all of them. In large part due to the Overwatch obsession and also being on PC. And it was partially because of that I got invited to lobbies with people in my year, saying things like, "Oh, Rory's really good, let him in." It gave me this really destructive mentality that I didn't even realize until some years later, where how I valued myself and my self-worth as a whole was tied to my skill in games. People will talk to me if I'm good, they'll play with me if I'm good. I couldn't handle being bad at them. When I was bad at something or trying something new, I would get way too obsessed with getting better, and I didn't actually stop to enjoy the process of learning. And it's not that I wanted to avoid that with fighters. Honestly, by the time I got to college, I wasn't even thinking like that anymore. Never mind thinking about how I used to be like that at all. But it was only recently, as I got passable at them, that I started thinking about how I used to be. I was proud of how I'd changed from my old teen angst hero shooter obsessed self, but also happy that I was enjoying these games for entirely different reasons. I have friends to play all sorts of games with, but fighters are fundamentally different for one reason. I could play Overwatch online. I've made a lot of friends online through Overwatch. I've played for hundreds of hours with them, but at the end of the day, when I would leave that Discord call, the pang of loneliness would kick back in, reminding me how I didn't actually have anyone I could talk about the games I played the next day during class. But with fighters, not only did I even get into them in the first place thanks to a great friend I made in Ruby, but they also helped me make more friends, and more friends in person at that. I can sit on a couch with my friend group, passing the controller around as we take turns taking each other on and laughing at fuck-ups as we play Melee. That real connection is something unique to a fighting game. I play Deadlock a lot with these same people, and I love it. Honestly, I think I enjoy Deadlock more than any actual fighting game I play. And sure, while I get to see them the next day at college, and that old teen loneliness is entirely gone, there is just something special. Some feeling that in-person fighting games create that I just can't get enough of. Playing my bracket game only to hear my friend at the other end of the room scream, "Bring me more street tears!" before myself and my opponent, another friend of mine, realized that Cyrus, our DK main, just beat someone he previously never had before, making the two of us start laughing mid-set and hearing the entire room erupt. Cheering because of how cool it was is just amazing. And words can barely describe how my heart felt when I was the one in the chair, at that TV, and that same set of people were erupting in cheers for a fucking Samus projectile combo on that same DK just a few weeks prior. That is what it's all about, and that is why I love fighting games.
I hate you.
Alright.
Oh.
Oh, go fuck yourself. Oh my god.
There's one thing I'm for. Oh, it's for the Yor. Some more. I like
He is like my friend.
Get back here!
Why is hiding in their spawn?
Dude, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry right here. I have to fucking
He's just hiding there, bro.
trying to gutter you, you bitch. In fact, you can confirm off of that the audacity of such a thing. No!
Oh!
Oh fuck! No! No! Shit! Stop that! No!
hit him with the bro.